Bostonian. Great to see you, Ralph. And beginning to fill up. And we are about 3 minutes out. And actually, it would be great if everybody that's gone online now, just go ahead and type in the chat your name and any affiliation that you might have or a special interest that you might want to make sure that the panelists address. Please put that in the chat. And during the course of the meeting, don't hesitate to put in a question there. We'll be relaying those questions to our panel tonight, which will be starting in just 3 or 4 more minutes.
Another sponsor, co-sponsor, just came on, Rand. AFSCME Local 2250 Vice President, Rock Island County Employees, Tracy Jones, and also a member of the Our Revolution Iowa chapter. Tracy just came on.
Welcome, Tracy. Yeah, we got a lot of, we're up to 50 participants, and I would imagine in the next few minutes we'll be gaining quite a few more. Oh, one of my homies, Roger Brunel, Painters, District Council 35. Great to see you, Roger. Glad you could make it tonight. I hope Chris can join us. All right. Well, I feel good on seeing the home team here. We're up to 60 participants. That's great. A couple more minutes and we'll get started. We've got, this is an event that Joe Lawrence, longtime organizer with AFSCME, and prior to that with Steelworkers and UAW. I'll let him introduce himself, but I will say that Joe has done a phenomenal job getting about 30 groups involved in promoting tonight's event, in addition to our Revolution National Office, which is our chief sponsor. And I have to say, it's really exciting to have an opportunity to meet the author of Fulfillment, a book that I very much have enjoyed. And we'll be offering discounted copies of that. And during the course of the program tonight, there'll also be links dropped in the chat to help you get resources and or materials relevant to the work that we're going to be doing to organize at Amazon. And already a good question. Will the recording be available to those who have RSVP'd but were unable to attend? That's an excellent question. I'm going to defer that to Hal or Mike from Our Revolution.
Hey, Rand, it'll be on Facebook for the rest of our time together. So I'll be on Facebook indefinitely, Our Revolution Facebook. So that'll be the best place to catch it, or on our YouTube channel or Instagram. So it'll be on all of Our Revolution social media properties.
Great. So we can spread those links around after the show, and people that weren't able to make it tonight can watch this program in perpetuity for free. Just think.
I'd like to give a little nod to a great activist in the Kalamazoo area. Really been leading an impressive fight for single-payer health care in the South Central Michigan. Bill Farmer, former staffer for AFSCME Michigan. He's on board.
Well, I see my pal from Wisconsin, Dave Newby, but even more surprising is to see a woman that I organized with in the Communications Workers of America probably 30 some odd years ago, Andrea Dimashevsky from Seattle. Great to see you, Andrea. Unbelievable. All right. Well, listen, we're at 8:01. Joe, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Well, this is great. I'm very heartened by the turnout here, and I want to welcome everyone to tonight's event on the crisis facing U.S. workers in the era of Amazon. Winning and losing in one click America. Amazon's part of a sweeping change on many fronts for us, economically, politically, and in how we live. Alec MacGillis, whose recently published book, Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One Click America, is here to give an insightful overview of those changes. He's followed briefly then by three particularly well-informed voices on the challenge posed by Amazon. It's perhaps the challenge of our time, which is why we have so many co-sponsors on this event, along with our main sponsor, Our Revolution. And it's why they've stepped up to the fight. These are organizations and individuals who in their communities and with their constituents show up every day to deliver and defend justice. And I want to thank them for being here. And we acknowledge many of them already. By the way, Dave Newby, who you noted, Rand, is one of the earlier co-sponsors of this event. He's president emeritus of the Wisconsin AFL-CIO. All these co-sponsors, and I would say probably most of the people already on this call know Amazon is part of the crisis we face. And we're grateful and honored to have these people with us today. And Our Revolution, the main sponsor, takes a backseat to nobody in this regard. They've been part of the fight to hold Amazon accountable and build power for workers by getting the PRO Act passed and electing local leaders to keep corporate grifters in check. And with that, I want to turn this over to Mike Olis of Our Revolution.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Rand, and thanks everybody for organizing this event together. My name is Mike Olis. I'm the National Field Director of Our Revolution. It is awesome to be with you tonight. Unfortunately, we're gathering because we have a huge problem in this country, and that is Amazon. It is a beast of a company that is affecting our way of life in communities across the country. And affecting especially workers across the country. And so tonight is honored to be with everybody as we think about how we fight together and develop a plan to make sure that in the United States that we have powerful unions, powerful communities, and elected officials who are all working together to fight for a future that Amazon doesn't dominate and doesn't dictate the conditions. So again, thank you everybody for having me tonight. I just want to give a quick update about Our Revolution and our work to fight against Amazon and for a future where we have good jobs, good pay, safe working conditions, and how communities that aren't lied to and aren't subsidizing this nightmare. So we've been at the fight of Amazon. Our Revolution has been fighting Amazon since really our founding back in 2016 when Bernie Sanders started us. Amazon and corporate greed has been a big part of what we've been about. This picture here is from our fight down in Bessemer, Alabama. We had a great crew of Our Revolution leaders who really helped out and provided solidarity work for the fight down in Bessemer earlier this year. And going forward, we are working extremely hard to pass the PRO Act. This was a picture from our rally on Saturday. You see that big building in the background.
Hey, Mike, you're not sharing. You're not sharing your screen, Mike.
It's not being shared? Okay, I need to share my screen. I wish somebody had said something a little bit earlier. 1 second. Okay, can everybody see the slides?
They're loading now. They're
So again,
in.
I just want to take us through this real quick. This is a photo of our work down in Bessemer, Alabama, where our team, our revolution leaders fought to help the Bessemer workers at the Amazon fulfillment facility down in Bessemer, where we didn't get the union this time, but built a national case about why Amazon is so wrong for the future of our country, and why workers and communities and elected officials got to work together and stand up and fight for something much better than what we have. But this photo here is from this past Saturday. This is an awesome photo. This is our ProAct rally that we held right in front of where Amazon is meeting right now in Virginia, right? So Amazon, about 4 blocks from the site, is opening their they call it HQ2. It's the headquarters, part 2 for Amazon. This is just a few miles from the White House and right across the river from Washington, D.C. Down the street from this park and that building, they are building their new HQ. And so we held a massive rally on Saturday with local unions from across the area, many unions and leaders from Virginia, calling on Senator Mark Warner, who, as one of our speakers joked, he's a senator representing Amazon and not Virginia. And he's one of just 3 Democrats who have not signed yet on to the PRO Act, the legislation that would be transformative in how we organize unions and how we win unions in our workplaces. And Mark Warner, who is very close with Amazon, is one of the stumbling blocks right now. And so this is us out in front of the Amazon, near the Amazon headquarters, HQ2, and this building in the background, that is where their temporary staff is right now until the new building gets built. So a great event on Saturday. And if you're in the metro area, if you're in your community, we want to be working with everybody as we hopefully come out of this pandemic and are hitting the streets again and organizing with everything we got. So that being said, I just want to again tonight, our revolution, you'll hear more about what we're up to, but lastly, what we want to do is we want to build our movement. I think you'll hear from some great movement builders tonight. Become a monthly member, a monthly donor of our revolution. Become a movement builder with us. We are building a mass movement together, organizing across the country, and $5-10 a month that allows our revolution to grow, expand, and really build our movement so that we can be funded by the grassroots, do big actions across the country, and build the massive organization that's going to take to defeat Amazon. So please become a member tonight of our revolution. And this lastly, I just got to note that as we think about the road ahead in Amazon, in the U.S. Congress, there's going to be a bill that we got to strip some language out of. We're going to be putting billions of dollars into the tech industry, and there is a bailout. I think it's a $10 billion bailout right now in this legislation, asking to bail out Jeff Bezos $10 billion for his space program, his private space program. And I know Bernie Sanders and others are going to be working hard to get that out of the legislation, but that is something that we want to be on top of. Is we don't want to be subsidizing Jeff Bezos' weird space dreams, right? We want to make sure that our tax dollars are used to uplift the community, not bust unions or support companies that bust unions, especially in space. We don't want any union busting in space, as we don't want it in Earth. So join us. So be on the lookout for that as that bill moves forward. I think it just passed the Senate and we'll head to the House for debate. So that being said, become a member of our revolution. Let's get organized, very organized in our communities, and let's make some stuff happen. So I'm gonna kick this back to Joe.
Thanks, Mike. That's a great update. OR is up to a lot of good stuff, and particularly on the Amazon front. Hey, just another couple of quick shout outs to some of our sponsors who have jumped on the call. The Washington Federation of State Employees, AFSCME Council 28, United UAWD, a group of UAW members fighting against the corporate abuse of workers. We're all just appreciate their sponsorship and glad they're on. Now, I mentioned earlier there'll be a panel responding to Alec McGillis's presentation. And we have commenting on the community and political aspects of Amazon's influence. We have Arlene Martinez of Good Jobs First, which has long been a turn-to organization for communities seeking accountability and to protect themselves from corporations like Amazon. And we're proud to have its executive director, Greg Leroy, as a co-sponsor tonight. Commenting on the challenges facing Amazon workers is Peter Olney, former organizing director of International Longshore and Warehouse Union, who's been working with Amazon worker activists, and Ira Pollack of Amazonians United, who works at a Queens Amazon facility. And by the way, many of you may be aware of a major story in today's New York Times, the Amazon customers don't see, a scathing expose of how the workers are treated, and I'm hoping we're going to get that link into the chat. Each of our speakers will conclude with suggestions of where people can turn if they're ready to pick up the fight, and whether it's in the community or alongside the Amazon workers themselves. Alec's book is a goldmine of information and insight. And by the way, we were able to arrange for a discount on the book, and I think that'll be in the chat, and for those ordering it here. And Alec, if you order it through here, Alec will also inscribe your copy. Check the chat for the link to the Ivy Bookstore and the book special code for getting the discount. And we'll talk about that a little more later in the presentation. Our featured speaker, Alec McGillis, is with ProPublica, a news outlet where much of Alec's work has been published through major outlets such as New York Times and The Atlantic. His career includes stints with the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post, and New Republic. His work has included major breaking stories and uncovering scandals, resulting in, among other things, public officials being driven from office and in at least one case into prison. Among his more recent exposés has been exposing Jared Kushner. I don't think you've forgotten him yet. So-called real estate magnate, is also one of the major slumlords in Baltimore County. Although I think I read he may have gotten out of it, due in no small part to the expose Alec had printed. But Alec's enduring mark has been his look into the economic and political changes in the American scene. He was among the first and the few to identify in 2016 the breakdown in the political dynamic in the industrial Midwest that proved to be the path to the presidency for Donald Trump. He's with us today to sketch out a comparably insidious trend embodied in and driven by Amazon that is polarizing the economy, both regionally and within communities, and it's fueling the inequality that is shredding the country. Tonight, we're in store for a fascinating and fast-paced discussion on some troubling developments threatening to overwhelm us, but also how we can push back. And with that, I give you Alec McGillis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. Just so grateful to you for putting this all together tonight, and grateful to the sponsors, Our Revolution, and all the other sponsors, and to the other speakers who joined us tonight, and also to all of you who are here with us. It's just really, really exciting to have this event. One of the coolest events I've gotten to do for the book. As Joe mentioned, my real preoccupation these last few years has been sort of what's happening to our political and economic landscape, and that's really how this book got going. Was not so much with Amazon itself, but with the growing disparities that I saw around the country as I was traveling around the U.S. as a political reporter, starting back really in 2008 when I was covering the Obama campaign for the Washington Post. And I would go out around the country to the Midwest, to Appalachia, and see just how much these towns and cities were struggling in the wake of the leading into the Great Recession, after the Great Recession. And I would then come back to Washington, D.C., where I was based for the Washington Post, and see this extraordinary prosperity and complacency and disconnect on display, just this incredible disconnect between what was happening out around the country and what was happening back in Metro Washington, where you had, if anything, that city getting even wealthier during the Great Recession. And I was really bothered by that gap and that disconnect. It reminded me a lot of what I saw growing up in Pittsfield, Mass, former GE town in Western Mass. Pittsfield just falling further and further behind the rest of the state, especially Metro Boston, and just being really troubled by that gap and wanting to write about it. And then finally, after Trump gets elected, realizing just what a huge effect that this disparity had on our politics, what a big role it played in the resentment, in the divides that led to Trump's election, that led to that cataclysm, and deciding that I really need to write a book about it. And then spending about a year thinking about how to come up with the right frame to write about this regional inequality, this regional disparity, which is so unhealthy for both sorts of places. That's the key thing. It's unhealthy for both, obviously, for the left behind towns and cities that are left with depopulation and depression and despair in all of its manifestations. And it's also bad for the winter cities that are left with extraordinary housing costs, unaffordability, mass displacement of longtime residents, loss of character, and it's a kind of off-kilterness of a sort that we haven't really had ever in this. Just the way our income ladder has grown bigger and bigger, the gap between the 1% and the 99%, so have our regional divides gotten bigger than they've ever been. So how could I write about this? How could I capture this in a big sweeping book? And I settled on Amazon as the frame for that story. And I settled on Amazon for two reasons. One is that the company is simply so ubiquitous now that it's a handy thread to take you around the country to show you what we're becoming as a society. In a sort of metaphorical sense, it just works very well as a kind of mirror onto who we now are. But more importantly, it works as a frame because Amazon itself is driving a lot of this inequality, this regional disparity. It and the other tech giants are a big part of it. One reason we have such concentration of wealth and prosperity in certain parts of this country is that our economy has gotten so concentrated in certain companies that so you have these giants, these tech giants that are essentially, to put it bluntly, soaking up all this wealth and business activity and commerce that used to be dispersed around the country is now being kind of soaked up by them into the places where they are headquartered and reside. So you end up with Seattle, the Bay Area, other cities with dystopian levels of wealth and inequality. And then all these other parts of the country that are just kind of reeling as they're left behind. So that's why I ended up with Amazon as a frame for the story of regional disparities. The book is not about Amazon itself, but it's about Amazon's America. It's about everything in the shadow of Amazon. That said, there is plenty of Amazon in the book, and tonight I think we'll be talking about a couple of main aspects of it, and I'll just quickly hit on a few of them. One, the nature of work in the warehouses. The core chapter of the book, really kind of the soul of the book, is the story of how one big peninsula in Baltimore went from having the biggest steel mill in the world, 30,000 people working at Sparrows Point, Bethlehem Steel at Sparrows Point, now has been completely replaced by a logistics business park, warehouse park, that now has 3 Amazon warehouses. And I actually found a man who had spent 30 years working at Beth Steel at Sparrows Point, that went on to work at the Amazon warehouse as a forklift driver. And the contrast between the kind of work that he did in both places, the Amazon job paying him only a third as much, vastly less purpose and meaning and camaraderie on that job. He barely lasted there 3 years after having spent 3 decades at the steel mill. And so just talking about that, the nature of that shift in the work, what we have to reckon with right now is that Amazon has become the new mass workplace option in this country. The way you used to go down to the factory, the mill, say that maybe the shopping mall for a job when you just needed a job, you didn't have a college degree, you didn't have specialized training, you went down to those places. Now you go to the warehouse. 500,000, almost 500,000 more people hired just this past year in addition at Amazon. It is now the new mass option. So if you want to improve working life in this country, you have to now address the warehouses. That is where it's at. That's why fights like Bessemer matter so much. The other thing we're going to talk about tonight is the whole impact on communities, chiefly through the whole Amazon's whole tax avoidance game. One of the things that just blew my mind as I was doing my reporting for this book was just how obsequious, just how willing local communities, state, local, county officials were to give away tax subsidies to Amazon and to promise them all sorts of promises of secrecy and agreements to withhold any kind of information from the local press as these negotiations played out. And then a third aspect, which is I got into in a whole chapter in the book, has to do with another form of the unraveling of our communities, the unraveling of our sort of local fabric, which is the effect of Amazon on small business, and just the extraordinary pressure that a company exerts on small businesses to on the ones that have not yet been put out of business by Amazon, who now feel pressure to join Amazon to sell on the marketplace, because that's where we're all going to buy everything, and they end up paying 15 to 30% of their revenues to Amazon in various fees and commissions. So those are just three aspects of the company, and it's just this astonishing dominance. But for me, it all still comes back to the regional inequality, the disparities that have left us with the landscape that is just completely out of whack. And that out of whackness has played such a role in the distortion of our politics that have brought us to this point. So I'll leave it there for now, but thanks again, Joe, for organizing this. Back to you.
That was simply great, Alan. Thank you. And you laid out quite a case there. And now I want to bring on Arlene Martinez of Good Jobs First. As I noted at the outset, this is the turn to. This is where you go. It's a national clearinghouse for research information on accountable economic development. It's been an invaluable ally to communities and states who are defending themselves from abusive corporations seeking subsidies and other concessions. It strengthens socially responsible economic development. I encourage everyone to check out its website, goodjobsfirst.org, which we put up in the chat. And we're quite fortunate to have its communications director, Arlene Martinez, formerly with the LA Times, here to comment on ALEC's findings and add insight of her own. Arlene, thank you for coming.
Hi, thanks for having me. So Amazon first hit my radar when I was a reporter at the Morning Call in Allentown, Pennsylvania, actually. It was 2011, and Spencer Soper had written a story about an Amazon warehouse that was so hot because it didn't have air conditioning that Amazon paid for an ambulance to wait outside of the warehouse so it wouldn't have to pay because workers were collapsing and fainting rather than pay for air conditioning. So that was the first time that Amazon kind of got on my radar, and I've been tracking the company ever since with great interest. So when I joined Good Jobs First last year, I was just excited to be part of an organization that really closely tracks subsidies, but also the effect it has on workplace wages and other things. So next. So this is just, Amazon isn't the only company that's getting subsidies from local governments. This is just a list of some of the ways that companies get money. There's property tax, there's sales tax, all types of things. And Amazon has really been driven, has really exploited existing public policy to its advantage. So the decision to locate in the first place in Seattle was because there was no sales tax, right? So for years, they got to enjoy what brick and mortar stores had to pay, which was the sales tax. They didn't have to pay it for years. And then finally, the rules started changing and states started catching up with this online shopping that was getting bigger and bigger. And then that's really when we saw this shift in Amazon going toward public subsidies from governments. Next. So that's sort of we're looking here at the chart of when this happened. Around 2012 was when really there was this big sort of binge in Amazon seeking subsidies wherever it went. And that coincided again with these states starting to close in on these sales tax exemptions. So we just see deal after deal after deal. And this slide shows, I think it's you'll see in 2020, there was still quite a bit of activity, even as the pandemic was contributing toward this massive growth and this explosion in sales. And in 2021, we're still seeing the same kind of trend. There was a $150 million deal just earlier this year in upstate New York. And so far this year, it's about $550 million that Amazon has gotten in public subsidies. As you've probably seen, Jeff Bezos has hit $200 billion for personal wealth. And the company is just having these massive year over year sales growths due to the pandemic. And but that isn't stopping governments from opening up their wallets. Next. So we're a small organization, but we're very efficient. And so we have a research analyst who just scours press and is always looking at different economic development departments and states all over the country. So what she has found so far is that we've passed the $4 billion mark. We think it's probably a lot higher. What Alec was talking about with the secrecy of the deals is what we started seeing a lot more in the last couple of years because of the negative publicity. So a lot of times it'll be under a developer's name that they're just going to say a warehouse is coming, and then it'll end up being Amazon, but the public won't know. And there was an interesting is one word, but there was an exchange in Alec's book, this email exchange between an economic development official and the people coming to bring Amazon in, and it was really wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm going to keep this quiet, and it was just sort of outrageous, right? Because it isn't their money to give away; it's public dollars, and so there's something that's very, outraging about giving away public dollars and doing it with a wink and a nod. And I know that some communities, having covered local government for so long, I know a lot of city councils and economic development directors just want to do right for their citizens. They think they're helping, trying to bring jobs to areas that need them. But in most cases, the subsidies just don't even pay for themselves. So they're not a good deal for residents. And it's just bad public policy to give big companies money because it really disadvantages small businesses who aren't getting that kind of support. Next. So there's a couple things that Good Jobs First really recommends. And the first is that governments stop giving Amazon not a single dollar more in public money for any type of operation, any type of arm that it wants to expand. So that's sort of our top line. Enough is enough. There's no sense. It makes no sense under any circumstance that we've ever seen that we should give another dollar to this massive company that's, now growing toward becoming the biggest. It's on its way to overtake Walmart, right, as the biggest private employer here. So, and I think that this is another thing that local governments don't take advantage of or don't realize is how much power they really have to demand things of companies that come in, whether it's a housing development that comes in or whether it's a company coming in. There are things that communities are the ones that need to be setting the rules here. And I think they feel like their hands are tied, or they just don't, a lot of city councils are part-time positions. They don't realize that they actually have a lot of power to require things like community workforce agreements, right? So that you require a certain number of wages, and that the labor be local, or that it be union, that it pay prevailing warehouse wages, not retail wages, warehouse wages, because that's what the jobs are. And there are places that have done this. There are places that require 80% of your labor be local, or that you give some of the workers that must be historically disadvantaged communities. All that should be in there. And once that's in there, if you're a community that does that, then you have to make sure that it's carried out. So what we saw in upstate New York was this Amazon distribution facility that had gotten over $100 million in public money, asked for a relief from their labor agreement from having to pay prevailing and then hire local, and the city gave it to them, or the county gave it to them. So these deals have to be not just put into place, but enforced and tracked, because we know Amazon is just really smart in every kind of way, and they're always looking to pinch everywhere they can. And if they can get out of hiring locally so they don't have to pay more, then, that's what they're going to do. The environmental impact, of course, they're putting a lot of fossil fuel emissions out there. So require that their trucks be electric, and put it on them to pay for that. The minority woman-owned business enterprises should be part of the deal if procurement's a factor. And there should just be these other fees that communities should demand of Amazon. Amazon's coming in, and Spencer Soper, the same reporter who wrote those early stories at the Morning Call a decade ago, he's also done a lot of work looking at the Amazon effect when it comes in driving down wages in the community. So when I saw that New York Times article today, I was looking at how few people get promoted, and that's by design. It was nice to see it in writing and to see it, quantified in a way, but it was what we already knew, right? I mean, it's what you just, the turnover is so intense. They've got to hire so fast, and we know that attrition is so high. And I happen to have a relative who lives there, and he's had this dangled promotion for the whole 3 years that he's worked there, and there is no promotion. Hearing the New York Times talk about these college grads that Amazon's trying to get to come in, and these hotshot grads, right? Those are the ones that are going to take these plum jobs, and the rest are just disposable to Bezos, and that's not acceptable. And so, I'll just stop here, but just kind of reinforce what I said, is that there's no reason why Amazon should get a single more dollar, and communities have a lot of power, and I think they, residents and policymakers don't take advantage of that. So thanks. It's a delight to be here with you, Alec. Wonderful book. I've got it sitting in front of me on my desk here.
Thank you.
Arlene, that's great. Thank you. Do you have anything to ask Alec, or Alec, do you have anything to follow up with?
It was such a great presentation. I would just add quickly that punctuate the point about communities having more power than they realize on this. It's the fact is that right now Amazon needs to be just about everywhere, because they've gotten so big. We're buying so much from them, and they've promised us all 1 or 2 day delivery, and so they really kind of have to be everywhere to fulfill that promise. And so it's not like if Rochester, New York, or Buffalo, New York, or wherever says no to them, that they can just go to Indiana or New Hampshire. Like they've got to be there. And yes, I know they can sort of play the localities against each other to some degree, but communities really do have quite a bit of power now because of that need for them to be ubiquitous, but they don't seem to really grasp that.
Thank you. Before we go on to our next speakers, just a quick shout out to a couple of our other sponsors who are here. Railway Workers United, it's a fine group across different railroad unions, and Quad City UAW CAP, another sponsor, and their president, Rob Byrne, is here. I think we're going to follow up. This segues nicely to Peter Olney and Ira Pollack for what's happening with Amazon workers across the country. Peter, as I may have noted earlier, was the former International Longshore and Warehouse union organizing director. Ira, and he serves as an advisor to Amazonians United, of which Ira Pollock is an activist in Amazonians United and works at a Amazon facility in Queens. So I'm just going to hand it over now to Peter, and thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joe. And thanks to Our Revolution for sponsoring, and you, Joe, for doing a great job organizing this thing and putting it together. I want to salute Alec McGillis for a masterwork and his overview of Amazon, the modern octopus. And as many of you know, Octopus was the name of Frank Norris's 1901 novel describing the evil role of the railroads in early 20th century America. Amazon is everywhere in American life, and the devastation that Alec describes of small communities in the Midwest is gut-wrenching. I also salute Alec for his excellent postmortem on the failed union vote in Bessemer, Alabama. His article in the New Yorker and ProPublica on April 13th, I think it's in the chat, is a good diagnostic of what happened in that drive, and he provides some excellent insights on the way forward. So based on my years of experience organizing in warehouse and logistics, and informed by Alec's excellent book, here are some of my thoughts on key questions to keep in mind as we take on the Amazon Worker Organizing Challenge. First of all, it's important to size up the challenge. Amazon is the second largest employer to Walmart. There are about 1 million Amazon employees in the United States alone at over 800 facilities. In 1942, when the UAW had succeeded in organizing General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford, that resulted in 350,000 new members. Amazon is a behemoth. No US labor organization has ever conquered a company of this size. Amazon's an existential challenge for companies like United Parcel Service, where the Teamsters have 250,000 members. They're an existential challenge to the giant ocean carriers, whose stevedoring subsidiaries employ our union's members on the West Coast and the ILA's members on the East Coast. Will Amazon be buying ships soon? You bet your ass. It's an existential threat to unionized retail grocery workers. They already own Whole Foods, and they already have 11 airplanes, and are building out air sortation centers all over the country. Amazon is a complicated operation. It's an evil company with a brilliant business model that employs algorithms and robots and the uber exploitation of labor to deliver product overnight to customers. Its random chaos business model means that the production system, or the logistics supply chain, is built out with redundancy to respond quickly to customer orders. This redundancy can also respond to labor strife. But we can rise to the challenge. We have to ask, where is Amazon most vulnerable? How do we flip their business model in our favor? Are giant fulfillment centers like Bessemer or JFK 8 on Staten Island more strategic than last mile delivery stations like the one that Ira works in? We have to do an analysis of the choke points in their system, just as the UAW did for General Motors, where they determined that Flint, Michigan and Cleveland, Ohio, because they were producing auto bodies for the GM chain, were choke points where if you could muck it up, you could bring the whole system to a halt. We have to understand that many forces are necessary to win this battle. There's no one union, no one policy initiative that's going to be the silver bullet. There are already multiple forces on the battlefield. The Service Employees Union has been doing some great work in the Twin Cities at the Shakopee Fulfillment Center. The Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union ran a union drive in Bessemer, and I'm sure we'll be running more. The Teamsters Union is active in the Inland Empire in Southern California, and the UFCW has their eye on Whole Foods. Those are some of the unions in play. Athena for Democracy is a national coalition of community groups, immigrant rights groups, and unions involved in a lot of public policy, antitrust, and regulatory initiatives. Amazon Employees for Climate Justice is built around headquarters workers dealing with Amazon's carbon footprint. Good Jobs First is here with us this evening, and of course, our host organization, Our Revolution, has been involved in the battle against Amazon. And finally, I want to emphasize the important work of Amazonians United. You'll hear from Ira in a second on their national network of organizing that's been going on for 4 or 5 years. Any organizing we do will have to address the fact that the workforce, by Amazon's 2020 numbers, in the warehouses is 60%, 68% people of color and 51% women. That's no surprise. That's one reason the Bessemer story in Alabama resonated with organizations like the Southern Workers Assembly, formed in 1982 by the United Electrical Workers in partnership with Black Workers for Justice in North Carolina. This will be a long haul with lots of experimentation. As Alec points out in his essay, when the steel industry was finally organized in 1941, that was a culmination of 50 years of worker organizing. Rand Wilson and I wrote a chapter in a great book on Amazon called The Price of Free Shipping. And our basic point is that in the final analysis, there will need to be a solid alliance between committed organizers, usually young socialists and political people, and a union or unions. That collaboration is the way we'll bring economic justice and rights to the workers of Amazon. This was the story of organization of steel, auto, and electrical in the 30s. Some such collaboration will be necessary today. Therefore, the in-plant warehouse base building of Amazonians United and others is crucial and needs to be promoted and supported. No labor board election strategies, recognition strikes, or pressure campaigns can be successful without in-plant organizing, committee building, and engagement in winning warehouse floor struggles. That is why the work that Ira and Amazonians United are doing is so essential to winning for workers at Amazon. Today's New York Times has a front page feature article, which mentioned before, the Amazon the customers don't see. I commend it to everyone. You should read it. It describes the horrific labor practices at the giant Staten Island fulfillment center. It speculates that ex-CEO Jeff Bezos may be undergoing a change of heart about his inhumane labor practices after the spotlight on Bessemer. Do not be fooled. The only way to bring workplace justice is the old-fashioned way: unionization and legally binding labor agreements. So thanks for everyone for participating this evening, and thank you especially to Alec for this excellent book on Amazon. Maybe Ira would like to pick up the ball here, or
I was trying to find my mute button. Thank you, Peter. And thank you folks with Our Revolution for putting this on. So yeah, my name's Ira. I organize with Amazonians United. I live in Queens, New York City. I work in a delivery station here. And when trying to describe Amazonians United and what it is, I like to start with looking at Bessemer and recognizing that around half of the warehouse voted, a little bit more than half. 1,500 or so voted against. 700 or so voted for, and then there were like 300 or 400 disputed votes. Those numbers might be slightly off, but what we know is like 750 people voted to have a union. And that was in the face of a lot of company propaganda, repression, threats, changing the stoplights, collaboration with the city government. There was still 750 people who it's undisputable that they stood up and said, we want a union. And there was another 300 or 400 where Amazon disputed those in court. So those were probably pro-union votes as well. So in that warehouse of 5,500 workers, we know at least 1,000 in the face of all of Amazon's propaganda wanted a union. And so what we practice is called pre-majority unionism or minority unionism. And we don't need to have an election where a majority vote to have a union for us to say we've got a union. We need to recognize that there's a significant portion of every warehouse, of every workplace that is ready to take action, and they don't need the government to give them permission. They don't need an election to give them permission, and they don't need the company to give them permission. And so our goal is to find those people and to build committees with those people and to start taking action. So for us, a union isn't something the government can tell us can have. It doesn't need to be something that's certified. It's the process of connecting with our coworkers, building committees with our coworkers, running actions on the shop floor that usually start with petitions. We identify the issues, we bring more people into the process, and eventually you start winning over those people who previously would have voted no, who were anti-union. You start gaining people's trust and you start growing community in the warehouse, and eventually that pre-majority becomes a majority. And all of this without an election. We primarily focused on our efforts in delivery stations. We're operating in a few delivery stations in Chicago, New York City. We've got some underground work elsewhere. But the primary premise of the way we operate is we're the ones who decide if we're a union. And a union is a process. A union means we decide to take action together and we do it. And so a big thing that you hear over and over again from Amazon workers is the isolation is crushing. Most people leave because of the isolation. The work conditions suck too, it's hard, but it's the isolation, it's feeling like you're in there alone. And that's one of the single things that you hear come up over and over again is it's an isolating job. And so when you start building community at work, you realize a union is fighting for better conditions together, but it's also like fighting for a better life together and building that life together. And so in our time in the past 2.5 years, we started small. We started with what issues you can win at the warehouse level, lack of clean water, lack of air conditioning. Our original petitions may have had a few dozen signatures, and we would follow them up with an action with, a few people marching on the boss. But management gets kind of scared and they start giving in on some of those smaller things and more people come on board. And eventually our petitions would have, 3/4 of the warehouse. And our marches on the boss would have 40 or 50 people participating in it. We've done actions where we've shut down every belt in the warehouse to do a moment of silence for the death of a coworker that management wouldn't acknowledge. And I'm not sure this is true, but someone in management told me that Jeff Bezos himself called the warehouse to see what was going on when every belt in it shut off. Probably not true, but kind of cool anecdote. We've done coordinated campaigns between cities and different warehouses. And so this is the way we operate. Things like strikes, things like elections, walkouts, these are all tactics, but the main thing is we need to start building the recognition amongst workers and our coworkers that we are all the people who are going to make this happen. One of my coworkers and one of my co-organizers, also a socialist, uses this term from lefty circles, protagonism. Like we are the protagonists of our own story, and our story is history. And most people don't think like that. Most people don't think that this person stowing this envelope in this lane and picking out this bag to put it on that truck, most people don't think that that's the person who's going to make their lives better. And so when we start getting people recognizing that that person in that lane stowing that package with that person next to them in the next lane, those two people are going to make their lives better together. That's when we start seeing that we can make changes at Amazon. And we've seen it happen. Like one of our biggest coordinated campaigns was for paid time off for part-timers, and we won it for thousands of workers. So this is a protracted process. It's not something you can kill with an election, because it keeps going. As long as the workers recognize themselves as a union, it doesn't matter if the company or the government tells us we're not. Then you can later get the government to call you one too, but that comes next. Then you can later get the company to recognize you too, but that comes next. The first thing is to get the workers to recognize yourselves as one. And sort of one last topic, Peter alluded to socialists in the labor movement back in the day. And I think it's really important because we perceive of labor organizing is this thing that's apolitical, but it's not. It's intensely political. And one thing that we find inspiration from is a lot of the labor uprisings in Detroit. And I'm going to be bring up a specific example of that because of, if you watch the news, a situation of great injustice recently that's been ongoing for decades. And one of the coolest things about what happened in the labor uprisings in Detroit was when the Arab workers band together and they went on strike to get the union to withdraw its investments in the Israeli military and the Israeli state. And so that was workers recognizing a political problem and recognizing that their power to take action, it actually transcends just those workplace issues, that they recognize themselves as part of a universal struggle with, overseas international struggle, and they took action. And that was the start of one of the most important anti-imperialist movements in the country, right? That was like the precursor to the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. So when we grow with our coworkers, we're very specific that like issues of oppression, that issues of social reproduction, these are central to what Amazon's doing to us. The surveillance that they practice and hone on us in the warehouse, they then go sell that to cops that terrorize communities. They then go sell that to Border Patrol. They're selling that to the Israeli Defense Fund right now. So we make these connections that everything we're doing is political. And that's not alienating to a lot of people. You can't start with that. You don't lead with it. It's the economic issues too. But yeah, so like we need to build a movement that starts on the shop floor, but it's a movement for social justice. It's not just a movement for those economic changes. It does start with those economic changes though. You can't really lead with the the big socialist visioning. But yeah, so that's us. That's Amazonians United. I don't know if I've got another second, but I'll just say to anyone who like wants to get involved in Amazonians United, you can reach out. There's going to be some links in the chat. If you work at Amazon, we can help you organize. If you're looking for work and you want to get a job at Amazon to help build the movement, we can help you hone your labor organizing skills. We can plug you in that way. So the main thing we need is people who are willing to organize a type of solidarity-based union from the shop floor that starts with collective action and ends with bigger collective action. So if you can get a good job at Amazon, get in touch. If you already work at Amazon, get in touch. We can definitely use you.
Ira, this is fantastic. This is inspiring. Was going to try to get you and Peter to talk with Alec for a bit here, but we're going to go straight to Rand on something, and then when we come back to Alec for a rejoiner, if there's some follow-up that you two want to and Alec can do, that'd be great. But for now, I want to give this back to Rand for a second. And that, Ira, I can't say it enough. You're on the money. Good luck.
Terrific panel. And Ira, I did post quite a few links to Amazonians United and to the New York City Twitter feed and to some great articles and labor notes about the work that you and your coworkers have been doing. At this point, I want to ask our Hal or Mike, can you go ahead and launch our first poll question tonight for all the participants? Let's see if we can get the poll up there. There we go. The first question is, have you found tonight's discussion interesting? And if so, are you moved to take action to confront Amazon's growing monopoly power and hyper exploitation of workers? So let's go ahead and fill that out. You should be able to see it on your screens. And it'd be great if we can get 197 people to do the poll tonight. Let's see if we're getting some people filling it out. Yep, Hal's nodding. Great. And then the second question for tonight is, after you've done the first one, is tonight's forum has raised concerns about Amazon's impact on workers, on our communities, small business, and the environment. Please indicate the issue area where you would like to concentrate your organizing efforts. Check off labor, community, small business, environment, or other. I know it's hard to pick one, but pick the one that would be most important to you. And this will help us to follow up. Thanks, Joe. And I'll let the poll stay for another minute or two. And then before we sign off, Mike or Hal, you can publish the results to share with the participants. Thanks, everybody.
Well, we're running behind, but I want Alec, I'm dying to know your thoughts, Alec, on tonight and what you've heard, what stood out for you, or if you have a question for any of the panelists.
Sure. I do have a question for Peter and Ira on those great presentations, which were just so sharp in their analysis. I love Peter's grasp of how Amazon has revolutionized warehouse work with the random chaos approach and how that changes the way you have to attack them. And I love Ira's articulation of the isolating nature of the work, which I agree is such a huge part of what's different about it. One way that I've come to think of the warehouse work is that it has replaced retail jobs, traditional retail brick and mortar jobs. That's really what's happened here. That's the biggest job loss category in the country, the retail sales clerk, and it's been replaced by warehouse jobs that are in some cases better paid than the retail clerk, but in many cases not better paid. And certainly more isolating, certainly more atomizing, and certainly more physically taxing than the retail work was. And so it really resembles more factory assembly line work, but it's not nearly as well paid as most factory work. And it's also much less purposeful and likely more isolating than the factory work was. And so it's really a new kind of mass work, and that's really how we have to think about it. But my question for both of them is something I've been thinking about a lot following the Bessemer coverage and then also reading today's Big Times piece. It just dawns on you how incredibly transient the work is, and the fact that Amazon is actually encouraging that. And that's really becoming clearer and clearer in all this reporting this year, is that they really are, they encourage a kind of planned obsolescence of their workers. They don't want them to stick around, because if they stick around, they're going to cause trouble. And they're, even the good things that they do, like offering a bonus if you leave, or offering you community college classes here or there to find a different job, are all actually meant to keep the turnover as high as possible. And some of the numbers in the Times piece today on the turnover was astonishing, just how high the turnover actually is. And so in that context, how does one build that solidarity? And I know it's not impossible, because I think it was Peter who reminded me a while ago that at the auto plants back in the early days, like teens and 20s, you had very high turnover then as well, and you were nonetheless able to build some kind of movement there. But how really, now that we see just how incredibly much they are encouraging that kind of turnover, how does one deal with that from an organizing perspective?
You want to jump in, Ira, or you want me to take it?
Absolutely. This is like the crux of how we organize. If people feel like they have family at work, they're more inclined to stick around. And our most successful precursor to when we started taking action was a few of us would buy empanadas, bring them to work, and we'd make sure to bring a few extra. So when the person at the table across from us, looked over, we'd be like, "Oh, we got extra, you want one?" And then we would eventually, we'd be like, we go every Thursday, so give me your number and I'll text you when I'm going. You can Venmo me. So we ended up getting easily 50 numbers that way. And we would have empanada nights that I'd be carrying in a bag of 60 empanadas, and the new hires would see us eating empanadas and they'd be like, "Oh, management brought empanadas," and we'd be like, no, just dig in and give me your number. So we'll settle the score later. Yeah. But so on Thursday nights, I would be mad texting on my phone, how many empanadas you want? What kind you want? I'd be doing these big ass lists. And then we would have bowling nights. We had barbecues in the park. It's harder with social distancing, but it's starting to open up again. And even through COVID, we all recognize that Amazon wanted to cram us together on the belt. where we couldn't be 6 feet apart and we were breathing in each other's face. But for some reason, then we weren't allowed to interact with each other in the break room. So we would find space to interact outside of the break room. But like sharing food was always the precursor to good organizing. You gotta build that family at home. You gotta do mutual aid. We do like ride shares with each other. You know, we do carpools. And we wouldn't have been able to do a single petition if we didn't precede it by building family at work. So that's how you fight turnover, and that's how you build solidarity and trust before, and give people a reason to stay there. You build that community, you build a life together.
Yeah, I think Ira has nailed it. I would add a couple things. One is that this is the importance of the multiple forces approach to organizing, so that all the work that's being done by allies, community organizations, all of that develops a social safety net for those Amazon workers and makes their task of organizing and sticking to it a lot easier. Second thing is, I think there are some issues around sustainability that we're grappling with. I think some of our veterans can tell us that, yes, indeed, those assembly line jobs back in the day, nobody was alive then on this call, but people have studied the history. And 1913, Ford Highland Park, the turnover was 300%. And much of the organizing of those industries happened based on the initiatives of skilled tradespeople, tool and die makers, folks that had skills. And some of the early organization was along craft lines, and then they expanded it to industrial organizing. I think there may be some analogs in Amazon. Robot mechanics. Why can't we train up to do that work? Great job to circulate around the warehouse, meet people, sustain yourselves. So I think Ira's answer is the fundamental question, but I think there are some issues around support and sustainability that we are going to have to take a look at.
Well, this has been great. Thank you much. Before we turn it back over to Mike Olis, when he's done, we're going to announce the poll results. And before we go any further, one more, just want to give another shout out to Alex's book. The link to Ivy Bookstore is in the chat, and you'll get a discount as well as an inscribed copy. So please, if you're at all interested, do that, and I hope you are, because it's just consensus. It's a fascinating book. So we'll hear the poll results in a bit, but right now, this has built the case that we got to organize, and I think our revolution is the way to do it for not only Amazon but to the political changes that we need to have come about. So, Mike, why don't you return to what we need to do here?
Thanks, Joe, and thank you everybody for organizing this tonight. This is sort of a one-off event. We haven't done something like this in a while, and tonight was very inspiring. I think we had over 200 people join us at some point tonight. So we had over 200 people from across the country, and I saw names from East Coast to West Coast, and Midwest down south. So just an amazing night tonight, and I'm hoping this can become something that part of our fabric, that we can huddle up, read a book together, hear from the author, maybe keep in touch with Alec, keep the thread going. But fighting for unions is something that fighting for labor rights and fighting for the health and wealth of our communities is something that is at the heart and soul of what our revolution does. And so I just want to give a big shout out to everybody tonight, and hopefully this become part of our culture, and we can team up with Amazonians United and Good Jobs First, and all the unions that were here tonight. We can build a movement together, or keeping to build the movement together. So an amazing call. Want to just give one other opportunity to come up tomorrow all day. Our revolution is going to be doing a phone bank. We're going to be calling our members, who are very friendly and very nice, And we're going to ask them on these phone calls to reach out to their U.S. senators who have not signed on to the PRO Act. So tomorrow we're going to be calling basically 3 states and Democrat states of Virginia for Mark Warner. We want to fill his district office and his DC office, all day. Just get phone call saying support the PRO Act. Same thing in Arizona with both Mark Kelly and Kristen Sinema. Phone call all day in their office, both district and state. And then I think we're going to reach out to one of our Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. There's some thought or some hope, or maybe a vague hope, that she'll sign on to the PRO Act. And so we'll want to, I think, bring up to Alaska, both in district and in DC. So tomorrow there's a couple of shifts going on. And if you want to be part of this, and I'll just see a note here from Michelle Schacht. And I was like, is that the Michelle Schacht I know from the music world? And it might be. So I'm seeing this, musicians organize a strike against Amazon. And I don't know if Michelle, if maybe we could have you come online here and talk a little bit about that, if that is you. So
Pretty sure it is, Mike.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up, and maybe Michelle can just tell us about the strike, and maybe she can end this call with us. So I will let me see if I can do some online magic here. And Michelle, not to put you in the spot, but I think we'd love to hear about the strike. And give me 1 second. And I think music and standing up for musicians is also a big part of what we want to do and create community. So I'm promoting Michelle,
website.
a panelist. So Michelle, if you're not put on the spot, we'd love for you maybe to talk to us about the strike and about what musicians are up to in this moment.
Hi, everybody. I'm here in New York City, and I hope you can hear me.
Yep, loud and clear.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
There was a action against Amazon who used their technology to enable ICE for immigration and deportation. And so last March, there was an initiative at South by Southwest where a lot of independent musicians to outside of Amazon sponsored events. And it was called No Tech, No for ICE. And then also Amazon Music, of course, has been as predatory for musicians and their Twitch unlicensed channel. Their platform encourages infringing content, and it affects independent musicians. So there's a lot of union organizing within AFM and also just within the independent music community, union of musician and artist workers. And right by your side, every great movement needs a song to keep the march going. So we're glad to be in this fight with y'all.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's amazing. Let's be in touch, and let's do everything we can to help and be part of that struggle also. And love your music also. And so thank you so much for being with us tonight. And please, let's be in touch on how we can all fight together. But let's, Joe, do you want to end this? Do you want to end this out tonight? And you helped organize tonight. This is your brainchild, and I think we want to keep doing this and gathering up as a movement.
Yes, and yes. Before we sign off, was there any kind of a poll result we were going to do, or we going to just announce that later?
Oh yeah, so I don't know if people can see the poll result, but I'll go ahead and read them if you can't see it. So question number 1, have you found tonight's discussion interesting? And if so, are you moved to take action to confront Amazon's growing monopoly power and hyper exploitation of workers? Yes, 110 voters, 92%, no, 0%. Not sure yet. 10 people, 8% of the vote. So that's a pretty good election result. 92% saying of 122 voters saying they thought tonight's call is ready to ready to take next steps. So question number 2. Tonight's forum raised concerns about Amazon's impact on workers, our communities, small business, and environment. Please indicate the issue area where you would like to concentrate your organizing efforts. I see 64 people, 52%, so they want to focus on labor aspects of taking on Amazon. We had 34 people, 27% says they want to focus on the community aspects of taking on and transforming Amazon. 5 people say they want to focus on small business. 10% the environment, and 8 people, 6% said others. So Joe, that looks like an amazing organizing committee coming together to support the work that's already being done, and then hopefully weave us together.
I think this has worked out wonderfully. The key is follow-up, and I think people were going to hear from us, and because I think there's something happening here. So thank you for everybody coming on board, the sponsors, your champs, the panel, fantastic, and the people who participated, who signed on today, made it a real success. And thank you very much. And Alec, oh yes, and Alec McGillis.
Great. Well,
Thank you, sir.
Buy the book.
Buy the damn book, yeah.
And thanks a lot, everybody.
Yeah, thank
you
you.
Right.
get 10% off tonight, right? So 10% off, buy the book.
Thank you, everybody.
I'll sign it too.